Indeed, you are watching Good Morning Kenya. My name is Mike Migu. Welcome to Eye on Politics, where we explore the political landscape within the country. And in studio already, my guest is here. That is Wakili George Kithi, who is the advocate of the High Court. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
We are also expecting Wakili Gibson Gisore, who is also the advocate of the High Court, as the program continues. And how has your year started?
Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you too.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
We hope to have a better year.
Yes.
It matters economy. It matters rule of law.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have the problem of now. It's like a pandemic, abductions.
Yeah.
We hope it can stop. It's uncouth.
Yes.
It shouldn't have a place in a society.
Yes.
And then we should also learn to tolerate each other. We're going to continuously be irritants to each other, obviously because the space of communication and expression continue to expand. It's not just the Facebook and the X spaces. There are many others that are going to come. If you take a public office, just understand one thing. It's not your private office. It's a constitutional given place where you hold that place in trust for Kenyans. It's Kenyans who speak what they want for that office. So the earlier that is, we learn about the dispensation of the Constitution and what it wants with those offices, read with Article 1 on sovereignty. You're going to either give up public offices or take it knowing what you're getting yourself into. It's going to be even more nasty. Kenyans don't care anymore, don't fear power anymore, because that's what we wanted. Dilute power as much as possible so that those that are in leadership are responsive to the people. And I think we're headed there. It's a transition in terms of testing the constitutional environment. So it was going to have its own challenges, especially for those that are in power. But eventually they will learn the hard way that Kenyans are resilient. And it's going to head there because that's what the Constitution wants.
Yes.
In fact, that's the architecture of the Constitution.
And it's also going to be a very interesting time politically in the country. You have to agree to
No,
that.
campaigns are starting now.
Yes.
So those
Unofficially.
Yes, unofficially there'll be campaigns.
Yeah.
Because see, you angle out the formations, political formations are coming.
Yeah.
Then ethnicity is going to be higher because the ethnic interests are going to be more diverse. And therefore the national fissure in terms of interest is going to expand more. There'll be more fault lines and therefore more criticism, especially to government. Those that are outside government will be forming themselves much more, in fact, much more and higher decibels in criticizing government, so that, because they want to get into government. Government will be more defensive. Probably government will roll out more projects just to pan out an environment so that it has a more stable environment to campaign for itself. So there'll be those dynamics. But we hope money circulates.
Yes.
Yeah. We hope, above all, the Kenyan is comfortable and much better in terms of the lifestyle that is lived, because things weren't very good last year.
In other words, the economic environment gets better.
It has to, because the one who manages the economy has to promise something.
Yes.
You know, promise of future is different from promise of the past. A record is easy to investigate because we have now a lot of tools to investigate that, include the people themselves, internet and such records. But if you're saying, I will do this for you, it's futuristic. So it's easy to campaign if you're outside than if you're inside. So yes, we will, I think, have a more stable environment because mistakes such as abduction, economic pressure on the people, strikes by teachers, by doctors, by this, that's not good. So probably there'll be more discipline in terms of how those that are in power handle people or Kenyans.
All right. Yep. All right. Let's look at what is making headlines in our local dailies, and we are starting with the Daily Nation. Rough start for schools. Millions of learners will resume learning in primary, junior and secondary schools today amid various challenges that have continually plagued Kenya's basic education sector. Schools will reopen without the 50% annual capitation due to them. While some learning centers will not have classrooms to host grade 9 learners. Additionally, some schools have not received textbooks under the government program as bookshops countrywide continue to turn away parents seeking to buy the learning materials. That story is told on page 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation. The aspect of capitation and inadequate learning facilities How should the government approach this going forward?
I think it's a question of planning. Being in the government, by the way, is very difficult. It's not easy. Being at the top, getting resources, balancing the interests of the different sectors in government vis-a-vis the political interests, and many other interests that subdue clarity is not an easy job. So getting into leadership of a country like this, which is very ambitious, I can say it's extremely ambitious, because they prompt you know, they prompt a lot. They cajole a lot. They want more and more, and so there's no day you'll do your best. If you're out, it's easy to say you did this, you did this road, but when you're inside, it's not going to be a good relationship with the people. So balancing all that with the lean government that the Constitution has prescribed in terms of limits, you have to work within those limits. However, and there's now more scrutiny. We've left rule of law in the context of human rights. We've moved to economic rights, which is what the Gen Z protests last year were all about. Economic rights in terms of budgeting, appropriation and all that. So in the entire budget cycle, there's a lot of scrutiny too. So you don't have full liberty upon yourself. The people continue to exercise the sovereignty over many sectors, including the economic rights now. So what has been distinct and dominant is the economic rights. Come back to, you know, the planning and allocation of resources to different sectors. I do think that education is key, but planning and knowing what to do and doing what you have to do are two different things. I believe that there are three types of people. The first one is a theorizer, an armchair theorizer who says Kenya needs to have a new airport, blah, 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 all that. Or even in your own cycle, you will meet those people who theorize a lot, but functionally they are different. They can work. There are those that they have to be employed for them to function. So they basically transform. They're the ones who use transform the theory into, you know, something on paper. And that's in planning. So we have that in Kenya. We have very good theorizers. We have very good planners. This education was planned, and I think the results could also be seen on if you look at the transition and everything. Now, monetize that, plan that such that everything falls into time. Those are called executors. We don't have that in Kenya. Very poor execution of everything. And you realize that the Kenyans become impatient because a promise has been transmitted from, you know, the roadside promise and everything into probably a theory of sorts. Kazi kwa vijana, you know, Hustlers Fund, all that. At execution, look at Hustlers Fund. At execution, look at Kazi kwa vijana. Look at everything. Execution is difficult. But the person who appoints people to execute for him must know they execute for him. So if you appoint somebody because of political connection, he won't execute, yet you want an executioner. And therefore it won't be done. That's where pilferage happens. That is where failure happens. So if you want to doom yourself into failing, then appoint your friends to execute for you, because there's very little you can do to friends who have supported you to get into power. So yes, there is a moral, probably there's a more justification for you to appoint someone who you are together. But in terms of the execution, realize that he's not the right person. So keep on shuffling them and moving them from one ministry to another. By the time you're moving them from one ministry to another, just know that you're failing, because you're moving a problem from one place to another. It doesn't mean that if you move someone from finance to sports is a lesser place. There are people there who rely on sports for their entire life. They have to play football, for instance, to manage their lives and feed their children and take people to education. So the education sector, you can see the transition from Magoha and the planning then, and the people who've supported, who've been at the top in managing education until where we are. If the vision of the planners then had been transmitted into proper executioners, the planning effect could have been realized in terms of timelines. We're having that problem because, I have said, money allocations is a problem. You need to have visibility and clarity away from the political turmoil that you're going to have every time.
Yes.
And I've said Kenyans are very demanding, obviously because of very expanded middle class, and probably a generation that is up in arms because of the globalization availability of information on what is right, what is wrong. So it's a very educated society. Move that and look at the environment of execution. You execute technical issues using political means in the way you make the appointments, then there's going to be a problem. And I think that's where we are in terms of education.
Let's hold on to that point, because the issue of capitation has always been a thorn in the flesh, and we are going to talk about it when we come back from this short break. Don't go too far. You're watching Good Morning Kenya. My name is Mike Migwe, and I'm having this conversation with none other than Wakili George Kithi. Now, before we went on a break, there's something about capitation. It has always been a problem. Almost every time, school heads complaining that capitation has not been released. So, henceforth, how is this? Are we going to see changes going forward? Because the government says it is in the process of releasing over 48 billion shillings to schools for the first term.
Well, a government is a bureaucracy, so there are many processes that need to be effected. If you're an officer in government, you would rather be beholden to the system provided in place. So that you are safe. Because if you bypass a system and records are incomplete, and you execute the right thing without the process being right, notwithstanding whether you've, in the process, no loss has been suffered by government, you are still liable to be prosecuted. It's called abuse of office. So if the government places a procedure for appropriation, whether it's parliament or anything that needs to be done, has not been done, there's nothing you can do to move money until that which must be done in the process is done. And it's not a single thing, nor two or three things. There are multiple of things that are involved in end processes for you to be able to appropriate and procure any disbursement. Number two is there's priorities that need to be catered for. For instance, there are salaries that must be paid to the disciplined forces and to the community of the public officers that serve the public. Those ones probably come first before even the sector, the education sector, as you've raised. But how government works, again, is the coercive element that becomes where the government becomes more responsive. For instance, the disciplined forces, you wouldn't want a problem with them. Number two is, if you put doctors and teachers, depending on the context, if it's probably next to exams or the political environment, may have an upper hand over doctors in terms of allocation and facilitation for payments, for whatever reason. But at times, doctors probably are more coercive in the demand, in the priority of hierarchy of, the payments and disbursement. Schools are opening, but we're headed to a political environment now where criticism becomes an issue to appeal to the public. So decisions are not just made for the good of Mwananchi, it is made for survival of whoever is making decisions. And therefore, fast forward is the convenience of the term and the context. But number two is the government's need to exist and continue to subsist. That's perpetuity of the government for the term allocated. So it will make decisions that are political. So if the head teachers, probably their voice is less, they're less coercive, they won't get that money early. Others are going to get that money, other sectors. But it is important for government to know also that planning is everything. There's no day I don't think this country will lack money completely, because on a daily basis we collect money to fund those sectors, including education. How that's appropriated, for instance, money can be used for Jamhuri Day. The legacies of that function as an allocation of funds that eats into the public coffers, as opposed to a school funding for classrooms for a region such as Turkana or somewhere, because we'll have classrooms in certain areas as we move into the new term, is an issue. So the question of planning, where the government works together and checks on what needed where, becomes important. Disjointed government and interests that need to be funded too, because the government funds certain interests are personal. I think is the problem. So yes, this problem has been there, but because, and it's perpetual, but because there's a cycle of change in management of education at the top every time, either through reshuffles or through change of government, you come in when you don't have a memory of the problem that was there, because you are coming with a different policy. Now, applying that policy in the newness of occupation of office lacks the sensitivity of the experience of the last, and therefore, obviously, is going to be consistent, it's going to be persistent. Suffice it to say, therefore, that the problem with government, although we put it in the constitution such as that, is perpetual, and it's no amount of change of the leadership at the top, including the presidency or the executive, would compromise the continuation of the government. The truth of the matter is, the personnel with memory, with a zeal, and with intent, because you see, you perceive with a certain heart of passion. If that is removed, then it's good as dead. That's why we have many policies in government for implementation in the shelves, dusting, obviously because of lack of the passion to implement. And of course, like I said, government orients itself to priority on account of the national the context of the national situation. So it's situational. We deal with this because people are making noise, and it continues to be bullied and bullied and bullied. So it's a question of planning. If you plan well, then you don't get bullied by the noise of the society. You continue to plan ahead, and such things won't happen. But remember, we're always asking for an ideal. When you're government, the public becomes an irritant. When you're working for the public, although you wanted that office to serve the public, but the demands of the public that are persistent and consistent, you look at them as irritants, and therefore it becomes a push and pull and frictional, because you think they're demanding more. It's the duty of the public to demand, and that must be one of the things that they say has to be fixed. Education sector is more important because it is where we all survive from. We must be educated to be able to work and invest.
Speaking matters of education have also been highlighted by the Standard newspaper. They are saying here, education system at a crossroads. Schools opened today amid storm of challenges, teachers shortages, incomplete classrooms, delayed funds, and nationwide safety concerns. Parents, students, and educators brace for the unpredictable as grade 9 transition under CBC kicks off, and protests loom over abductions and governance failures. That is a story you will read on page 4 of the Standard newspaper. Still on matters education here, they're saying 1.5 million learners are expected to transition from grade 8 to 9 this week. And now, in terms of facilities, the number of classrooms that the government had planned to build was 18,000, but so far they have built 3,500 classrooms that have been built across the country, and the number of classrooms that are in various stages of completion remain at 7,500. Total number of classrooms projected but are yet to be built stand at 7,000. What happens to those grade 9 students who do not have, or schools where these classrooms have not even been started building?
You see, the government is a command structure. So you will be told as the principal of a school or the headmaster to educate the children and make sure they're educated. So how you share the resources available is really up to you and your planning. So whether you will teach students in shifts, whether they'll sit on a tree, you have to do what needs to be done, because you have been ordered to execute the intention of government or the order of government or the instruction. But the convenience of the student is what then is compromised. So you see, the government has employed the teacher. The teacher is going to teach at whatever condition that you place the teacher. If it's, the students are going to sit on stones or rocks, on logs, he's going to go to school and teach and leave. But then the student suffers the consequences. So we should be discussing the student welfare here in matters of education in that instability, because half of more than 50% of the projection has not been executed. Reason is either lack of funds, poor planning, or just sheer complacency in government. How do you speed up that? You will speed up when there's a crisis. So the day there's a crisis, it becomes a crisis in government, and therefore is going to be implemented and executed in a manner that is rapid towards execution and full completion when it becomes a crisis. And therefore government responds, whether there's threat for crisis or there's a crisis, an actual crisis, constructively. It's not a crisis now. In a week or so, it's going to be at its highest in terms of the noise that are going to be made and the disorganization. So they'll want to fix it in a hurry and therefore fix it chaotically. The other thing also, just know that when it is a disaster, anywhere where there's a disaster, it's where money is used most. The wanton wastage comes, and the opportunity for that personal gain is when there's a disaster. When there's a pandemic, floods, because accounting it is difficult, and this. Yes. So poor planning is one of the ways where you create spaces for chaos, and therefore, in terms of use of funds, it becomes more expensive, and therefore more business, and therefore you make more money. Whoever was planning, if had planned it so well, we will have all those classrooms, the 18,000 classrooms. And therefore, where would you make the money? But now that there'll be a crisis, there will be opportunities for instance, direct tendering, and so on and so forth. So there is no reason why this has not been done, to be honest, except for poor planning and for intentions that are illegal.
What does it speak to the quality of education that these learners are going to get? And also, on the other hand, we are talking about teachers, the morale of the teaching fraternity. It's
going to be bad. And also for the students, unfortunately, this is probably a test case for the eventuality of a new education system that we're implementing. We should have been worried that the transition has to be perfect or almost perfect. But I don't think we are there yet. We are threatening it because purely of infrastructural dysfunctionality. I do think that it's complacency and sloth and complacency within the administration. It can't be called out in any other way. But you see, in this government, constantly, not just this government, the government that we've seen, the evidence is the voice that's heard is the voice that carries the day. So students don't have an association where they can lobby for themselves and say, we don't have classrooms, we don't have desks. They won't be heard. Teachers have a problem because unless they go through their union, which is a welfare based for themselves, the infrastructure is different. And by the way, they can't say we are downing our tools because we don't have classrooms. It's not like the doctors who say the facilities in which we treat our patients are bad and therefore we're downing their tools. It's hard for a teacher to say, I'm downing my tool because I don't have facilities. You know why? Because other schools have those facilities. So it is a disheveled, disoriented environment without consistency in how implementation is done.
Yes.
However, you realize there's something called interest in government. So if I'm cabinet secretary and I come from a certain place, the infrastructure in that place is probably better built and modernized or whatever it's implemented than other places. You realize, therefore, that those that are suffering are those without leadership in government. Because those that are in government will pull towards developing their interests where they come from, because probably of political, enabling themselves politically, or otherwise pure bias on account of the ethnic background that they come from, or regional, or whatever it is. So it's hard to see a person, for instance, from Kisii, heading Ministry of Education, concentrating on Kilifi alone, concentrating on Taita alone, concentrating on, Turkana, and leaving Kisii. So has to do Kisii first. If you come from Meru, do Meru first. And eventually, therefore, you realize those that have had their people in power within the infrastructure of education, they are more developed. They have national schools, and such differences are obviously because it's promoted by national government. They have it better. If infrastructure for this education had been devolved, then the interest would have been different because the people themselves, through their county, ideally, of course, we are saying ideally because some counties are completely dysfunctional, ideally would have implemented the process and therefore known that if you don't have these classes, it's going to be a crisis for ourselves. The problem with government is one, that which belongs to all belongs to none. So something that is for national government, really giving it the attention that you need, as opposed to if it was your personal thing, is where probably the interests draw at the borderline. So if it is for government, it must be implemented as if it affects the individual as a person, because it does. But it's public, it's for all. And we call that the tragedy of commons. That which is common really is not personal, so it belongs to nobody. And therefore, you realize that they wanton wastage on account of the tragedy of commons principle, where then, because it's for the entire government, it isn't for none of us in terms of how we take care of it. And it shouldn't be that way. There's wanton wastage. And some of it is even in delay, complacency, and lack of, the creativity within the process. To see there's a problem in a certain area, the creativity there is very different in terms of implementation than other places. So this is a crisis that obviously is ahead of us in a few days. If it becomes a proper crisis, of course the government will deal with it. If it doesn't become a proper crisis, then yes, deal with it as individuals.
I'm also looking at the practicality of a situation where schools have been directed. Here, the Ministry of Education has directed principals to accommodate learners in classrooms initially intended for students joining Form 1. What happened? Because there's primary schools or junior schools that are not close to secondary schools.
Yes, especially in rural areas.
Yes.
But they don't care. They don't care because, you see, you make those decisions because you've been caught off guard. So you're looking for a way to, you have to make a pronouncement to be seen to solve a crisis, but the practicality is an impossibility. Yet you say it because that's a directive. Now, when you tell the head teachers to do that, they don't have to do it because they won't do it because it's impossible. Where I come from, my primary school and the secondary school could be, very far. We already have a problem looking for school fees for the students in transitioning from where they are to those centers. But you assume the convenience of your thought process, in the convenience of the thought process, that if you give that directive, it's going to be implemented seamlessly. When the practicality is oriental to the different facets of the education learning centers that we have, and therefore you don't have a data of inspection so that you make that pronouncement. You see, if you had uniformity, how the institutions in Nairobi are oriented is the same as those in Turkana, then you can make that pronouncement. But without the data of that convenience of a statement, and you still make it, I think is unreasonable.
Yes.
And therefore an abuse of even your office, and completely, you're punishing, not just because that directive is to the principals or heads of schools, but the person you're punishing are children, innocent children for that matter, who basically would depend on your mouth, how you pronounce yourself using your mouth, so that they suffer or they have comfort. And I think roadside, why would it get there? You didn't see it coming until you are now caught off guard, because that's really being caught off guard. I think it's wrong. Government needs to do its best. They may be doing their best, but the fact that it's uncoordinated is probably what then the public consumes as dysfunctional. Yet it could have been done better. And
it's going to be one of the challenges that are going to be very evident in this first term during learning.
We all know IBC should be there. We all know education. Terms will open, semesters are going to open. There'll be for exams, KCC, and people are going to transition to universities. We all know that. How come then we get to that you have to make a pronouncement for a first aid of sorts so that something can be done, yet you had all the time in terms of planning? There's something wrong. And I think, you sometimes pity the president. If you have appointed someone and he gets you there, it's a problem. So, I don't know, it's his appointment. Like it is said, he takes responsibility ultimately for the chaos in government because he brought it himself. He's the one who brought the people to work for him, how he supervises them, whether they fear him, they don't, whether they are friends, they're not, it's his responsibility. So politically he will respond to how the government forms itself and works for the people on account of how he has formed the government. So ultimately, the buck stops with him because he's the creator of all this system and probably the supervisor of all this system. So the executive takes blame on account of the fact that it is supposed to ensure in terms of supervision, things are implemented on account of timelines. We're in this country with timelines. We'll have election, we'll have schools opening, we'll have timelines. We have to harvest, we have to sell to the market, we have rains. You plan within the context of timeline that is given by God and not by yourself, and you can't do anything about it. There'll be day, there'll be night, you have to plan around the same. There'll be a month, there'll be a week, and there'll be the whole year. And there'll be a cycle of sorts.
Yes. There's a story captured on the front page of the Standard still. President faces challenges in bid to rebuild image. You will read that story on page 8 of the Standard newspaper. Analysts say the president should work on how his policies are communicated. This will be the final working year before embarking on re-election campaigns. What do you think of that?
You see, the president is a very good communicator, in person.
Yes.
If you have a one-on-one and you debate with him, those who have had advantages of talking to him, but he's very good at communicating. He has a problem, he's not an implementer. The president is not good at execution. So he has to rely on people to execute for him. Those people are failing him.
Yes.
Number two is, even when something is executed with good intentions, or is being executed with good intention, either the process or the end, it has to be explained to the people, disseminated to them, decoded to them in a manner as to understand what the government is. The government is a monstrous thing, it's a big thing. So you have then to relate to the people. You have to be organic to the people. If you're not, then you distance yourself from the people, which is what is happening now. I have seen the president painstakingly trying to take care of that environment in terms of appointing, people in departments to communicate for the government, spokespersons. I have seen him saying in justification, of course, I know it was political, but saying he needed an assistant who can communicate properly on his behalf and for government. He has done all that. It's still not working. It's not. Obviously, because he must communicate the language that people understand. And the people understand this language, not from press conferences. It's relational. What I have done, what I show you to be doing, and the resultant effect. So you can tell me, for instance, we have a better economic situation in the country, but it's not better.
It's not being felt.
Yes. So if you become a liar, I mean, people call you a liar.
Yeah.
And obviously because how you package your communication. When you say the economy is good, it's different from the economy is improved. Those are two different things. So you continue to suffer from your communication because people call you a liar when if you had shut up, you wouldn't be a liar. So it's a creature of your own undoing. So the government communication must be precise and also fear the resultant effect of what you say. Number two, 10 people so that the bravado, jingoism, chest thumping goes away. It is coming back, by the way. It is coming back. It is what led to protests, partly fuel, rather, not even led, but fuel the protest. The jingoism is still creeping back. completely without the president's own probably blessing. But people around him are chest thumping now, probably feeling like, I mean,
the big man syndrome.
Yes. The big man syndrome has its measure of elasticity. It reaches an end because kings come and go and regimes come and go. Through, you can expire through death, you can expire through, including a revolution. So don't excite the people that you rule into coercively submitting to you. I think rule so that there is parity in the manner in which you rule them and some form of acceptability, which is the equilibrium we're looking for. So we agree the economy is bad, you're going to taxes, we agree, but communicate and tell us that this tax is going here. But if you tell us this tax is going here, and then the effect is not going there, that becomes a problem. We are not a first world, by the way. We are still a socialist set. We still subscribe to, our socialism, African socialism.
Yeah.
And therefore, the capitalism effect, where we're supposed to understand coerciveness of capitalism as against socialism, won't work. At least now. Maybe 50 years, maybe 100 years from now, we don't know. But we're not yet there yet. Number two is, it's what priority, the priority effects. So if you're going to move priority in terms of industrialization or industrial growth into something else, communicate too. Do you know the power of communication is very important? You can do the best on earth, but without that communication, it's a problem. So I believe God sent Jesus Christ to the world purely to communicate that I'm God, but this is how I am. So you misunderstand me because of the history of Moses and all. Yeah. But as of now, my communication to you is through the instrument of a Bible, and these are the things that you need to look into. And it sets out the parameters of human relationship with God through communication. The Bible should not have been written if it was obvious that we're going to decode that information. But it had to be put into place so that God's communicate to the people. And the Quran exists so that then God's communicate to the people. And therefore, we must be able to communicate. I think government must improve its communication. I don't know what they're going to do because already they expended so much time.
I wanted to ask you, do you see a chance where the government is going to change its approach in the way it communicates its policies or projects to
It depends on the president, because the president is fast at releasing information by roadside or every opportunity he gets. We will do, we shall do this, we shall do this. He shouldn't do that. I think if he fixes that, it will be very easy for him, because remember, certain things we communicated that fall onto bad ears of the people. I mean, or the people don't receive it well. You can always walk away, because you'll have tested waters through the type of communication that you want. His cabinet is very passive at communicating the right thing, or they're not even believed. The believability here is an issue. When he says it himself, he risks being called a liar when something doesn't work out. So the manner in which he organizes communication is probably the biggest issue he should deal with now, than whether he's doing great things or small things. I do know that he is trying to fix the politics and the political environment so that he has a good transition, probably if he's towards his re-election. That is okay. But why should you get into such a situation where you are really hated? Hated because you don't communicate with the people properly. Not communicating to the people probably heralds something like taking the people for granted, which is wrong. If the president fixes his communication lines, that would be good for him. Because, to be honest, I think he's not doing bad things every day. Yes. But those good things, the bad things are seen because obviously bad things are more dominant than good things. But even those good things are not said to even exist. And therefore, the content throughout is the bad.
Let's take a break, and we'll still come back to that issue and also address the aspect where leaders are trading barbs right here on Good Morning Kenya. Keep it KBC Channel 1. You're still watching Good Morning Kenya. My name is Mike Migwe, and having this conversation with Wakili George Kithi. We were expecting to have Wakili Gibson Gisore, but I'm informed he is not able to make it. But the show must continue. Before we went on a break, we were addressing the matters to do with government communication. Why is it important that they need to have a centralized system where government information, anything to do with their policies, projects, and everything else needs to come from?
Well, first, communication, we put as a right, a constitutional right for the public. Government must communicate. In many institutions, we put calendars where the president addresses parliament, and government institutions become responsive or are made to be responsive to the people through communication and giving account on what needs to be done and happen. So that's important. Number two is communication is the basis of perception. And therefore, if the communication is not properly aligned, the government and whatever institution is beholden to execute the communication may not set out the agenda to the people so that people can make their decisions properly. For instance, in public participation, the people need to be communicated, information to be disseminated and decoded to them in a manner such that they understand the context for them to be able to participate in public participation and give their views. That's communication. If there's anything that government wants to do, appropriate funds, use funds of the public, because government doesn't come into power with its own money, it uses public money. The right of the citizen under Article 1 and all provisions of the Constitution and law made thereunder becomes distinct and sacrosanct. Suffice it to say, therefore, that communication is not just a favor. It is a bounden duty on part of government to communicate. And not just communicate in the pretense of it, communicate properly and disseminate properly and rightly so. The correct information and all material that must be communicated must be communicated. Remember, there's material that can be communicated, such as in matter security, state security, and so on and so forth. But that which is not exempted must be communicated in public. A question that continues to, not just this government, but every other government, was the public debt. What is the public debt? Where do we stand? We don't know. And that's oriental because who pays the debt? So how come you pay me a debt that you do not know the quantum? You don't know how much it is. How come you pay me for money you purportedly gave me, or I'm supposed to pay in a certain context, but I do not know how much it is? Why is that so difficult? That question is being litigated in court. But people, the public, went to court because there's no communication. Look, even in a daily, the daily activities of the government and public, there are certain things that are perceived, perception of secrecy. And when there's perception of secrecy, there's perception of corruption, perception of misdeeds. And, and that gets heated to get its own life and therefore becomes something of a friction between government and its people. And yet we need an environment and a perception of good intention, good faith from government. So the government, to be able to cover itself in terms of good faith to the people, it must have a good communication system. One that is functional and one that is believable when executed. For now, I think the government has failed. We have a good communicator in the president, but he gets into headwinds most of the time on account of the fact that he takes responsibility when he shouldn't. He must take responsibility as, as the figure that towers over all that for purposes of correcting that which is wrong and be seen to give direction. He can't give direction at the beginning, but when things are bad, be seen to give a different direction because he must give a direction howsoever. And therefore, I don't know why they're not getting it right, but I think, again, you fix that through appointments that honestly are not professional. I'm not saying the people who are there are not professional. I'm just saying that the appointments, there are better people to do it.
Yeah.
They're doing their best, but I know, and I will tell you, I know even in that department there's infighting.
Yes.
Yes, there is infighting, we know it. You know, you can't just hide. Some of them are friends and are colleagues and so on and so forth. We know that they live in a certain environment that is toxic, obviously, because you want to communicate a problem between this public officer and this public officer, and you must package it in a certain way to lie to the public.
Yeah.
And that becomes, and yet the public will know because it experienced the friction somewhere and so on and so forth. I mean, you can't lie when you're in government. That's the problem. And if you want to subscribe to lying, then we have tools as a public to be able to discover that. Okay. Remember, we know even pay slips of people. Yeah, we do. We know families. We know. So really, if you're in government, just do your thing, because the constitutional prescription is you hold that office, interest for the people. But if you can't, I would like to see somebody who resigns from a government position because he can't execute his responsibility in truth. Yeah. That will be more important. But the debate among Kenyans is consistently and persistently negative on government because of poor communication. Let it explain itself with the touch of the people, and to be seen to be working for the people and working for themselves. Okay. That becomes more important. And if lack of it is a bad thing, because it becomes dysfunctional and it orients certain rumors from the people, which becomes more and better way of consuming information. Rumors are sweeter, by the way, than the truth at times. Yeah.
Okay, all right. There's also the issue of abduction that is actually the talk within the country as of now, and there's so much pressure on the government to take responsibility, especially from the clergy, who are urging investigations to be conducted and information on it relayed to the public, failure to which both the IG and the head of the DCI ought to resign. But there's also the question of is there a limit to the freedom of expression from your standpoint as a lawyer? Yes,
there's a limit to the freedom of expression. You must express yourself within the confines of law and the boundaries set out. Mm-hmm. But again, if you exceed the limits, mm-hmm. you can only be punished under law, not at the whim and the emotion of another person. If you have exceeded the freedom that has been set out in law, which is delineated ordinarily, mm-hmm. meaning if you do certain thing, we'll punish you this way. Mm-hmm. I think the convenience of coercive power given to you as a public officer, to use it to abduct, kill, maim, harm, hurt, is a cheaper and I think convenient way of doing it, but it's not sustainable. It's cheaper because you only need a Subaru and a bullet, mm-hmm. to execute a person, and the officer to execute the person. But they'll kill 1, 2, 3, and the public will come for you as an uproar. Mm-hmm. That position which you hold will transition into someone else, either at that time or sometimes later. And then you will be responsible. It is not available in this constitutional dispensation for a public officer to kill another because he's been insulted. In fact, you should be insulted and called stupid if you're stupid. I'm sorry to use that word, for the reason that that is the only way to threaten you and to pump fear into your heart to be responsive to the voice of the people. Remember, when people get into power, they know what they're getting themselves into with excitement. But if you get there, we'll continuously pump fear into your heart by condemning what you do, by criticizing you, and sometimes, yes, insulting you. And that's not bad behavior. It is good behavior because we target you so that you deliver to the people. We must continue to pump heart in the hearts of public officers for them to be responsive to the people because they're not responsive. Fear is where you know that I touch this money, the public will come for me. I kill this person because he's insulted me, the public will come for me. That's the only way that we're going to have the rule of law into place. Fear, therefore, must be part of the administration in the cause of justice. Fear for the rule of law is that if I do something, I may be punished and I may be jailed. And in law, that's important. In fact, it's one of the penal, the principles in penology where then punishment becomes a deterrent. You Kenyans, and I repeat, Kenyans, the law prescribes in penology the principle of punishment, deterrence. So the more you pump fear into those in leadership, you're executing a constitutional principle in deterrence. Deterrence must exist in society. People must fear.
But to what limit? To what limit should people hold leaders accountable? Because you find people using sometimes very unprintable words.
Exactly. So deterrence has its limit. We must deter and continue to pump fear into the hearts of those that are in public. But they have families too. In fact, they have brothers and sisters. So also, you cannot do that to break the law. When you do it, you must be punished. Punished because we've said this is how you'll be punished. Not by being killed. You'll be killed if you commit robbery with violence, treason, or murder. Period. No any other way. If it is not, then you have to go through the process of law. You know, the process of law is not attractive because it is slow. Somebody will go there, you charge him, he gets a bond, he comes out, and he continues to live with his life. One day he's going to be jailed or punished. But that is exactly what we go through, every one of us. That's what we agreed. If we say, if somebody takes a plea and jailed at the same, let's say it. Let's change the law. But we can't change it because it is wrong. And therefore, if somebody commits a wrong, he must go through the process of you know, the legal criminal justice process so that is executed. And by there, at times, even using a foul language is not wrong. Just like killing is not always wrong. Killing another human being is not always wrong. There's justification at times. You get into your house, your daughter is being raped. You will kill that person out of the passion of the time at that instant. And that's not wrong. Even using foul language at times in itself is not wrong. But whether it's wrong or right, the suspicion is that it's an offense that will be committed. The person to say it is a magistrate or a judge. It is not for you to take a bullet into his head or abduct the person. So it is cheap, very cheap in today's dispensation, constitutional dispensation, for you to abduct people on account of silencing them. You know what you do? You annoy them, and therefore you fuel and multiply the insults. And why should you be insulted anyway? You're a human being. You'll be told the good, if it is your daughter and son, because you've educated them and the interests are different. But if it is a person you have a dispute with land, they won't say good things. They will say bad things. So the good and the bad exist in common measure and are available. And they're available for our utility. When we say good things, they're good. When we say bad things, they have to be within certain boundaries. If they pass those boundaries, it is the law, not the person, the law. So it is not the police, it is not the CI, it is not NIS, it is not anyone else. It is not even the command of the order of the executive or whatever it is. It is the law. The law must be seen in courts, in an open forum, before the courts.
Okay, be that as it may, going by those happenings, do you think the government has become intolerant to critics?
Yes. Yes, it is intolerant, because you can see it from the Oriental messaging of threatening and threats that we see every day. And government is not necessarily the president, but the handlers of the time, and those that seem to be close to government. And it's a perception. Okay? It's all about perception. Yes, it is intolerant. But two, it is intolerant because it has many things that are available for those insults. I mean, it means you provide the forum and the opportunity to be insulted. If the insults when Gen Zs were demonstrating didn't just come from the Gen Zs, No, they come from the entire public because they saw the economic environment is not, that the government was not being responsive to the economic situation of the country. And therefore, taxation over-taxation at that time became an issue. And therefore, insults were billed every day as against the government. When somebody insults somebody in government, he is billing that person in terms of response. It must be seen as a response from how you act or behave, and therefore you provide them with that environment. Look, you will be insulted, not because you are just a human being and you're being insulted. No, there'll be a reason for it. And therefore, because we've given you the tools of trade, the gun, the bullet, the Subaru, the what, you make a call and say, Fundisha, I mean, we saw a boy in Mombasa being defiled, sodomized basically. Is that right? Even if you are mad, you've been insulted, is that right? And people being killed, is that right? I mean, we kill for reason, not because somebody has been insulted. I think it's very cheap. It's cheap for anyone in government to get angry because he has been insulted. You exist there exactly because we are supposed to be your critique. Any other day you find an opportunity as a Kenyan to critique a public officer, please do it. It is your right. Yeah. There's no other space for you to do it except the space that you have. Please do it. Of course, do it within the parameters of law. Yeah. But do it. For heaven's sake, we must tell off and call out impropriety. And that's the interaction we have with the government. We don't interact with government by dancing to it and beating drums. No. It's by positive criticism, meaning if it is right to criticize, please do it. The only thing probably will urge Kenyans is we have a society to exist. Those that are in government are brothers and sisters. Yeah. They are parents. Yes. They have families too. So don't put into odium and shame on account of your passion and hatred. No. If it passes the limits and it's hate, then it's different. It will be punished within the law and not abducting and killing people.
This issue of abduction has become very emotive because we've seen some leaders trading barbs in front of the president, telling each other off regarding these abductions. What do you make of such situations?
It's called, that's bad behavior. The king, if you see, I mean, the servants of the king, and the highest of the servants of the king insulting each other. What is the boardroom? How is the boardroom there? The background? Because this is what is in public. You see, what we see is probably a very small percentage of what goes in the public. It means something dysfunctional about it. Also, the authority orients something called legitimacy. So if the legitimacy of the executive is at its highest, the passion is positive. If it's at its lowest, then the passion is negative. When people pronounce themselves using certain words which are a choice of the person to communicate threats, insults, it means the legitimacy has been lowered. And it's been lowered because of an existing context of environment in which that is allowed, because you can do it only if you're not threatened that if you do it, there'll be repercussions. And they do it without repercussions, so it is being tolerated. Alternatively, it is to fix something, because sometimes I will tell you to do something to so-and-so in order to fix that person, or probably generate an impassion against that person. So it could be deliberate and pre-planned. Alternatively, it could be impulsive, but on account of the lowered legitimacy of that person and the power of the office at that time. So we don't know how that office is interacted because we are not there. But the fact is we can read into what we see. And certainly, if we see punishment for those that are obsessed with insults, like we did for someone who was impeached on account of his bad mouthing, then that should be consistent. If you're going to be as harsh to, for instance, your deputy president and impeach him, or allow the impeachment, then we should be seeing certain steps taken to those that are, have foul mouth before even the president himself or the executive. So foul mouth is oriental to bad behavior in government that has grown and grown until now there's liberty to pronounce it to the public.
Yes. Yeah. we've seen leaders talking about this matter, some saying that people are abducting themselves, others saying that you can critique the policies of the government, but also if you cross the lines, we shall come for you. Are we losing a sense of humanity in this country?
We don't. We've already lost it. You know, when you get into power and you are obsessed with your existence at the top, then you lose all manner coercive so that you continue to exist at the top. It's not yet, I wouldn't call that the definition of dictatorship, but bad leadership. You have an opportunity at the beginning, always, to make it right and get it right. You surround yourself with people to help you get it right. But then you don't. You don't because you allow bad things to permeate and basically define a system. If you do so, you suffer many things. One of it is a very impatient public with you, where you will speak to them and leave, but they know what they think about you. But number two is where your own lieutenants can speak against the people and you tolerate that too. I think that we shouldn't have gotten there yet. But those that speak against, to the people in a manner such as to, in a jingoistic manner and pumping their chest, we've seen that happen. We've seen it happen because we've lived in this country. We will see it continue to happen, that power exists only for a term, sometimes a very short term. We continue to pray to a God that serves the people, not serves leadership. The people that are weak. We hope that God continues to be on the side of Kenyans, because it has never been that he has left us. He has gone for the leaders, and some of them have had it by the way, very few leaders continue to have their heads up the waters after they leave leadership. For the reason that they continue to exist with the people and how they've served them. But those that are saying the things that are saying, we can only listen and keep our records. When they leave leadership, they come back to our society. They have to live with us. The problem is, we're not going away as Kenyans. There is no way. Abduct, kill, but I don't think tomorrow we're going to move to Tanzania or Uganda. No. Those that are in Turkana will live in Turkana, in Kilifi, they live in Kilifi. In Muranga, they continue to live in Muranga. In Nyeri, they live in Nyeri. Or Mountain, everybody will live in this country. So we're not going anywhere. Threats or no threats. So the talk must be measured to the extent that we're all Kenyans and must live in this country.
Your parting shot.
Well, I think Happy New Year to all Kenyans. We're in this country, it's the country. Let's keep it for ourselves and for future generations. We are only here, I believe, for a short time. Let's do the best. Maybe 2025 is going to be a better year than last year. Last year wasn't very good because we had many other issues which we know. But I do hope that, and I pray to God that there's measure of advanced development for the country and a better country for ourselves, especially in 2025.
Okay. That is Wakili George Kithi. Thank you for making time to come on Good Morning.
Asante sana.
That is Wakili George Kithi joining us here on Good Morning Kenya for Eye on Politics, where we have addressed the political landscape within the country. And this is where we end this segment. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Mike Migwe. I leave you in the able hands of Vivian Ndegwa to continue with the rest of the program. Good morning.